administering pardons for these rioters who broke the law, attacked our police officers on January 6th. Pardoning the criminals who assaulted police officers and tried to halt the democratic process would be a dangerous endorsement of political violence. It would send a message to the country and to the world that those who use force to get their way will not be punished. It is wrong, it is reckless, and it would be an insult to the memory of those who died in connection that day.
Individuals who risk prosecution under the incoming Trump administration could receive preemptive pardons. President Joe Biden has said he's considering issuing pardons like this, and that would shield key figures possibly like Liz Cheney and Anthony Fauci from being prosecuted. Now remember, Biden demonstrated a novel use of pardons like this. That was when he granted his son Hunter Biden a pardon for any potential crimes committed between January 2014 and December of 2024. Biden has been pressed to give similar pardons to others, and he confirmed in an exclusive interview with USA Today that he's considering it. According to USA Today, it says, Biden said he is considering preemptive pardons for public figures such as former Republican Congresswoman Liz Cheney and former senior health official Dr. Anthony Fauci, who have been threatened with investigation and prosecution by incoming President Donald Trump. Biden said his decision would be based a little bit on whom Trump names to top administration roles. Now look, Biden issuing pardons would not necessarily prevent House Republicans or the incoming Trump team from carrying out criminal investigations. In fact, some have also suggested that a sweeping pardon like this could make a person unable to plead the Fifth if they're called in to testify, and that's given the fact there would be no risk of them incriminating themselves. As of now, though, time is also quickly running out for potential pardons like this. That's if Biden really intends to do it. Trump's inauguration is less than 2 weeks away.
We have great confidence in our son. I am not concerned about any accusations been made against him. It's used to get to me. I think it's kind of foul play, but look, it is what it is, and he's a grown man. He is the smartest man I know. I mean, in pure intellectual capacity.
Regarding the pardon, yeah, I put in the application for a presidential pardon because I believe that Joe Biden has the same responsibility to me that he had to his own son. And I would expect that the same exact pardon that he gave his son has to go to me and to anybody else that's on that enemies list, whether they want it or not. Because I assure you, solitary confinement where I did 51 days sucks.
Michael Cohen, I believe wholeheartedly that the solitary confinement was just a terrible experience for you. And I think your point about the enemies, the proverbial enemies list, right, is a good one. I wonder, have you heard anything back from the administration? It is my understanding that two things. The administration, one, is not going to give a pardon to anybody that doesn't want one. So folks who have prominently gone out and said, I do not want a pardon, the president is not going to issue a pardon to people that don't want one. But two,
they'll change their mind when they're sitting behind closed doors. That I can assure you, they're going to kick themselves in the backside for that one.
I think hindsight will always be 20/20. I guess my question is, have you heard from the Biden administration? And I am struck by your comparing yourself and Hunter Biden. And I wonder if, well, I'm going to just tell you, Michael Cohen, we're on national TV, we have a conversation. I don't necessarily think that's your best way to go get a pardon. I mean, Hunter Biden is the president's last surviving son. But your point, your other point, why I do think is a strong one.
I'm somebody's son also, by the way.
Also, sir, on pardons, have you ruled out a pardon for yourself or any other additional members of the family?
For myself?
Yes, sir.
What would I pardon myself for?
That's what I'm asking.
No, I have no contemplation of pardoning myself.
Committee should be doing, we should be recommending you to be prosecuted. We should be writing a criminal referral because you should be prosecuted for crimes against humanity.
And good afternoon. I'm Ann Vandersteel, and welcome to Steel News. And yes, we are still in the war zone. It is T-minus 6 days until January 20th. T-minus 6 days. A lot can happen in the next 6 days. Heck, a lot has been happening the past 4 years, and it only seems to be really ramping up. But I have faith, and I have faith in President Donald Trump that he's going to do the right thing, because this show today is dedicated to all of the J6 political prisoners, hostages, people who have been persecuted, whether they are in the system, in the Bureau of Prisons, or they're out, or they're somewhere in the process thereof awaiting sentencing, or they haven't even gone to trial yet. Whatever their status is, we are all J6ers today, every single American. And in the wake of the January 6, 2021 Capitol events, discussions around pardoning those involved have clearly intensified. President Donald Trump has indicated his intentions to pardon these individuals on January 20th, on his inauguration day. Advocacy groups and individuals such as those associated with the accounts of Tamara Lee, and of course, the Help Stop Hate account of David Summerall and others, Condemned USA, and of course, Suzanne Monk and Jake Lang and many, many others, have all been vocal in their support for the release and pardoning of the J6 prisoners. These groups have organized vigils, campaigns. They've done several documentaries exposing the Fedsurrection on January 6th in the effort to raise awareness and push for action. The pardoning of these political hostages looms over the backdrop of over 8,000 Biden pardons consisting of rapists, pedophiles, gang members, and he's also considering preemptive pardons for the likes of that demon, Anthony Fauci, that horrendous screeching owl, Liz Cheney, and of course, who can forget pencil neck Adam Schiff? If they're innocent, why do they need a pardon? Well, the classifieds document scandal is one of the many different areas that we can examine when we look at this rogue regime that has basically been squatting over at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. President Biden faced a lot of scrutiny after the classified documents from his time as vice president were actually found in unauthorized locations, including his home in Wilmington, Delaware, and at the Penn Biden Center, drawing a lot of comparisons to the similar use, of course, with President Trump, which, of course, we all know was a bunch of bunk. The handling of those classified documents has actually differed significantly. There was no issue. Then, of course, the Hunter Biden investigations. There have been extensive inquiries into Hunter Biden's business dealings. Who can forget all of those, particularly with Burisma in Ukraine, his financial transactions, or shall we say transgressions, with entities from China and Romania. And of course, all the claims, including allegations of influence peddling and the misuse of the Biden family name through direct evidence linking President Biden to these activities, are all over the place. And I want to thank Garrett Ziegler, because he's done one hell of a job of doing that. These investigations have definitely been a focal point for Republican-led probes, including discussions about an impeachment inquiry. And then, of course, let's not forget the Afghanistan withdrawal. That chaos, that manufactured chaos that never had to happen back in August of 2021, has been labeled a very significant scandal due to the loss of American lives and the rapid fall of Kabul to the Taliban. And of course, the abandonment of our allies and all those billions, I think it was $85 billion worth of basically brand new military equipment that President Trump had purchased for the military. The administration was criticized for planning and execution, leading to widespread condemnation from both sides of the political spectrum. And of course, my personal favorite, the border crisis. I've spent a lot of time on the border, as you know, with Operation Burning Edge. And of course, Joe Biden's administrations have led to increased illegal border crossings by the tens of millions, with critics arguing that the administration had not adequately managed the situation. No, they completely, absolutely manufactured the situation by completely abandoning Article 4, Section 4. And let's not forget the governors. They didn't stand on the Constitution either, when they could have defended themselves from foreign enemies under Article 1, Section 10, Clause 3. And then, of course, all these allegations of political interference and investigations that made the Department of Justice under Biden has been so slow to actually look at the criminal activities. Why? Oh, I don't know. Maybe Merrick Garland is part of the massive cover-up of all the criminal activities of Hunter Biden. Yeah, that's right. The sexual misconduct allegations and, of course, censorship by this administration has been over the top, particularly when it comes to COVID-19. The second the Trump administration looms over these deep state warlords, the debate of pardoning January 6 participants has to remain a very contentious issue, and we must keep it at the forefront of the news from now until January 6th. Because, of course, they want you to believe there's deep political division in our country over this. There isn't. We know there isn't. But those who support this Joe Biden regime, those corporate fascists, and of course, Nancy Pelosi and Liz Cheney, who were behind the J6 Fedsurrection, yeah, we're going to keep a watchful eye, and we're coming for all of them. Sidney Powell reached out to me earlier today. She's got a piece coming out, and I want to read this before we bring our guests on. This one paragraph. The Democrats' lawfare, setup, suppression of evidence, abusive prosecutions, grossly disparate sentences, and torturous conditions of confinement have destroyed public confidence in our legal system. In the interests of justice and to heal our nation, President Trump should immediately pardon in full or at least commute the sentence of each J6 prisoner, regardless of whether he or she is still detained pre-trial and after trial or has been released. Each has already served more time than if they had received a proper sentence for any real offense they might have committed. Release of all the J6 prisoners is important, an important part of the mandate we the people gave President Trump by an overwhelming majority on November 5th, 2024. And she says on January 20th, 2025, Americans are watching for the first promise kept. Well, I agree with her. We are going to be watching very closely, and there's some incredible people that are joining me now that have been doing the heavy lifting of keeping this a very important issue in front of all of our faces for the past 4 years. I dare say any of these people have slept or actually had a chance to really enjoy dinner with their parents, or excuse me, their children, get out and do anything fun for the past 4 years, because this has been the focus of everything they're doing. Tamara Lee has been made famous for her support, along with Pasquale Scopoliti, the late Pasquale Scopoliti, in her work with the pardon of innocence for General Flynn. That was something that President Trump issued. As you know, General Flynn was railroaded by the Department of Justice, including the FBI and Judge Sullivan in his own courtroom. It was an absolutely despicable crime to witness. I was there. I saw it firsthand. And David Summerall with Stop Hate, who has been absolutely relentless in his support of the J6ers, putting out documentary after documentary, joins me now because, frankly, we need to have good people like this around us at all the time. So let me bring these two folks on and say hello to, whoopsie, what's going on with my screen here? Remove that. There you are. Good to see you all.
Good to see you two today.
Great to be here. Thanks, Ann.
So listen, we are T-6 from this unbelievable day, and the world is watching. JD Vance, did a piece earlier with what's the Fox News lady's name? I can't recall right now. And he left people with a lot of consternation about his comments, particularly saying that, if you were violent, you weren't going to be getting a pardon. David, I want to start with you because that really shocked a lot of people into, sort of disbelief, particularly those in the prisons right now that are, hanging on a thread.
Yeah, they really are. And look, it's a very unfortunate position that they're in the first place. We don't need anyone doubling down on anything negative that has to do with getting these people their freedom that they deserve. Sidney is the master at the words around that. Sidney Powell, she really captures it when she says, commute the sentences, then let's work on the pardon project. I mean, it's going to take a couple days. You can't do these things immediately, but we can get them out of harm's way immediately. These are innocent people, and Trump knows that if anything happens to them, on his watch, he's going to be responsible for it. So I'm sure he wants to get them out of harm's way, or where someone else can, do something bad to them, or where the Board of Prison, keeps playing the shell game and moving these people around, making it difficult for us to locate them and keep a good identifier on where everyone is so we can get them home during this process. It's a really arduous task ahead of us, and we could use a little bit of presidential support if he would just say that it's going to be on, day one. It's going to be the first few hours. It's going to be, guaranteed. I'm going to talk to the Board of Prisons, to the wardens, and make sure that they release these people. There's so many things that need to happen for that coordination. And Ann, we appreciate the spotlight that you've put on this whole topic. And of course, the pardons are necessary, as Tamara will say, to correct a system that's broken, that won't fix itself. But this is where we are. And I think JD Vance's statement, let me just say real quick, it's an eye-opener for people. There's still so many people that are in the dark about what actually happened on January 6th. JD did us a favor, whether he knows it or not, or whether people see it or not, by spurring that conversation of why, and who deserves what, and what really was violence, and who attacked who, because still the majority of the American public does not understand what exactly happened, that the police attacked a peaceful crowd, that this is all the result of that poisonous tree And I think that's helping with exposing that to the public at large. So I appreciate what he did, whether he did it on purpose or not. We don't know what test marketing is from these guys and, how they're trying to feel out the public, but I think that's a big part of it.
Yeah, I agree with you, David. Trump is very famous for his A/B testing, right? He does take a look and take a poll all the time. I've spoken to people that have worked for him. I worked for him many years ago, and his patented mode of operation was to walk into your office, and he did this on our office on Fridays regularly down in West Palm Beach. And while we only had 5 or 6 people in our office that were upstairs working at that time in charge of sales and leasing, he took a poll. He came in and he asked you what was working, what wasn't working. And he went around the room and he just listened. He listened to everybody's answer. And if there was issues with the building or whatnot, he was very good about making notes. And then by Monday, things were fixed and humming back along again until the next weekend when we had other issues to address, if there even were. So I think the A/B testing is something that I believe he does engage in. Whether J.D. Vance misspoke or not, Tamara, I saw you put a tweet out about that. You commented on that particular episode with Shannon Bream on Fox, and you kind of went after him a little bit, reminded him, scolded him a little bit like a mom, maybe.
Yeah, I'm old enough to be his mother. That's why. Yeah, well, the language around it matters, as you recall, because you were there with us from the beginning with the Pardon Flynn Now movement. Part of the campaign was really getting the public messaging and getting people to understand why the words matter. As David said, corrupt courts don't self-correct. That was kind of our tagline in terms of the setup that Flynn was politically persecuted for in his prosecution. And so out of that work came the framework for J6. And so as soon as the arrest started happening, or even being talked about on January 6th. You and I were there, spent some of that day together. And so we said we can use this same blueprint to apply to these J6ers. And as David mentioned, there was the fruit of the poison tree, there was the entrapment. So the work of the pardon movement was to run parallel with what Sydney was doing in the Flynn case through the courts. We had the conversation around exoneration versus pardon. Then we coalesced around the pardon of innocence, that it's a tool of the executive branch when the judiciary is not seeking justice as its outcome, when it's going after political persecution prosecutions, which is wrong. Then the check and balance by the executive, by the president, is to be able to use that power of pardons in a way to balance the scales of justice correctly. And so when J.D. Vance stepped in it, either intentionally or unintentionally, someone at his level can do such harm by not getting the talking points correct. And that was my issue with him. There's no excuse at that level to not know the fundamental facts of January 6th. The police started the violence, the entrapment, the way that the J6 cherry-picked video footage to frame patriots, the way that the courts in D.C. through all of these various cases were not allowing January 6ers to use, one, not only the First Amendment as part of their defense, but to deny the fact of that the reason they went there was to exercise First Amendment right in redressing our government. January 6ers went to D.C. The Trump supporters went there for 2 reasons. Trump asked us, and so as his base, we wanted to support him. We believe that the numbers mattered in the visuals, right? When Trump holds rallies, those big rallies, the numbers, because we know for decades, whether it was a rally for life or whatever, that the mainstream media would downplay the size of the crowds. And I always likened Trump's rally as back in the Last Kingdom days, or Camelot, of calling your people, raising your armies to show the vast numbers, and there was strength in those numbers. And so we went there for that reason, because Trump asked us to come. And then the second reason was there was problems with the 2020 election. We went there to redress our government, to politically, peacefully and patriotically protest and say, wait a minute, do not certify this election. Let's examine the evidence. But as we know, who are in the have been in this since day one of January 6th, that the whole thing, the Fed's direction, was orchestrated so that evidence by certain states would not be admitted into the congressional record in that joint session of Congress, so that that was not heard. They used emergency ruling. Ivan Raiklin, who you've had on your show, did great work of explaining the process, why the procedures and the rules were bent under the guise of COVID to be able to create the chaos, to disrupt the hearing, disrupt the certification process, so that in the dark of night they could come back, certify the election. That and so all of these key pieces that were in place matter, and somebody like JD Vance should at least be correct on those key talking points whenever he talks to the media of why the J6ers deserve the pardon of innocence. Now, Suzanne Monk, who I know you've also had on your show, who I worked with on the pardon of J6 Pardon Project, we've taken that pardon of innocence to apply to some of the J6ers. And then there's also allowance for pardon of mercy for maybe if someone did something right. We've given it to the Trump team to make their decision on how the language around different pardons may be. But the point is that pardon for all, they all need to be pardoned. Their sentences need to be commuted, and so that they can be set free on day one. And yes, as David said, we need to know this and have that assurance, because plans are in the works to be able to be at every location where J6ers are, if in the event, when in the event that they're released, that we've got teams in place to be able to meet them outside and then continue the next steps for getting them integrated back into their lives, because their lives has been destroyed.
Oh, most definitely. They've been destroyed, and some have sadly taken their lives because they couldn't handle what had happened to them. They had so much shame in what was being.
Weight of the federal government against you. How do you survive that?
How do you survive that? That's exactly right. And they're still rounding people up even as we speak. I mean, this is not ending. There was a lot of people there that day, so they had no problem going through and continuing the persecution. David, with respect to entrapment, because we know and I clearly saw the team with the reddish orange MAGA hats flipped around backwards. We saw the entrapment before our eyes, and some of us, I know I did, saw Capitol Police and said, hey, those guys aren't us. I don't know who those guys are, but they don't belong in this crowd of people over here outside peacefully praying. They're over there breaking windows and they're agitating people. Ray Epps, of course, we all know who that name famously comes to mind. But what should be done about the entrappers, the literal FBI, confidential human sources, or criminal informants, or confidential informants, whatever you want to call these assets? What should be done about those, and Antifa, et cetera?
That's a great point, and a lot of confusion goes about the informants. The bad guys in the crowd do need to be caught. They do need to be brought to justice. My position has always been that they don't need to be sitting in jail for trespass or for entering a restricted area or any of the petty J6 crimes that J6ers have had no choice but to suffer from because they had nothing better to throw against them. If they're bad guys, they need to be in jail for things that are bad, like inciting a riot or attempted murder, on some of these police officers, if that's the case. And that would not be proper charging if they're sitting there for trespass. So I believe that we have to depend on people like Kash Patel to come in and do a thorough job, do a real job, do something that the FBI has never done before, their job, and do it properly and efficiently and effectively. The freedom of these people, it's temporary if they're bad. I believe a thorough investigation would, flush out all the people that are supposed to, be the bad guys or that weren't there for the same purposes as the people that Tamara was expressing and explaining earlier. The folks that just went because there was issues with the election or because of COVID or because of business or lockdowns or shutdowns, whatever their reasons were. It was not to overthrow a government. It was not this manufactured chaos that was presented to the public. You don't have to script the truth like the select committee does. Therefore, it's fable, it's make-believe, it's stories. And I believe the public has been robbed of that so much, and that's the importance of having this conversation and understand what the charges for some of these people are or aren't, and when you get down to the violence, was it really a water bottle or a flagpole? A lot of people don't understand. They still think that we went and attacked the police That's really not the case. And unfortunately, it's going to take us 6 more days, I'm sure, to explain to the public what's really happening here and why it's a necessity that that means every one of the J6ers get a pardon of innocence or pardon of mercy, that they're commuted, their sentences immediately, get them out of harm's way. Like Sidney Powell said, because it's so important that nothing happened bad to these good people. They went to fight for Trump. It's up to him to fight for them.
Right. And what do you say to some of the people that are out there claiming that, this has become a very divisive issue, even inside of our own quotes MAGA movement. And I start to really question the people that question those that were there. There were people, Dr. Simone Gold, right? This woman is a real freedom fighter. She has done so much for the medical freedom space, and she's done so much good to help people. She went in the Capitol. She gave her speech because she and I were at the same stage, in fact, on the medical freedom stage, waiting to speak. I was standing with Dr. Zelenko at that moment when I got a text from Katja Lee saying, "Oh my gosh, they stormed the Capitol." And I was like, what? I couldn't see the Capitol from behind the building I was at. It was behind the Hart building, the Senate building. So, when I walked over to the Capitol, well, we now know Simone was in there. She was giving her speech, so on and so forth. But, this isn't somebody who was trying to burn anything down. She made a conscious choice to go in there because she saw everybody else going in there. But there are people inside our own quotes movement. And Tamara, I'm going to ask you, what do we do with these people that are sitting there excoriating? I mean, they're calling me out for being there, saying I was, trying to get people to storm the Capitol. That's the furthest thing from the truth. I was there documenting. I was there early in the morning and I asked people, are you planning on storming the Capitol? If this doesn't go the way you want it to go. That's not telling them to storm the Capitol. That was asking a question, right? So how do we address this? Because that is also leading to massive confusion in terms of what's right and what's wrong in this situation, Tamara.
Well, I think it's one of the things David and I talked about right away after it happened was recapturing our language and the words around that we use. And when they came out right away on MSM and rhinos like Ted Cruz saying, oh, they were violent, it was a mob, it was an insurrection, all of those narratives that they were trying to get sticky so that the truth of the event would not come out. We countered those and said, with the language of who was, and David did that with J6, A True Timeline of, and Writing History, the first documentary came out with June 4th, 2021, collecting the first person experience of everybody there so that you could see and put the timelines on it, the timestamps, and see what actually happened. But those words matter. And you'll remember back when we went through the whole debate with Flynn of exoneration versus pardon of innocent versus, letting the courts do their thing. It matters. And it's really part of educating the public on understanding these words. And we look at our Declaration of Independence, which Pasquale Scopoliti loved and studied, and the words in there are not just empty words. It calls us to redress our government. It calls us to throw off a tyrannical government. So what do those words mean? Literally, does it mean we storm the Capitol? We would say no, not in today's day and age. That's not what they meant. So it's really understanding people. And my second chapter in my book, Pardon of Innocence, that will be coming out shortly here in 2025, is from censorship to cells, as in prison cells. And they started, Ann, we were all part of that censorship as they realized how effective MAGA was in messaging, of getting out a movement, of being able to trend a hashtag, using the words. We took back our language. We took back our social discourse in the public square and dominated it. And it caught them off guard, I believe, 2016 to 2018. And then the censorship increased and we'd get shadow banned. We'd get suspended. We'd get silenced so that we couldn't be vocal. We couldn't message around these ideas, these words, these movements. And so when we got to January 6th, the language that they needed to use to label us all they were ready to lock us up for our censorship. And this is where people, your average American who doesn't understand this bigger 50,000 foot view of what was going on, it could happen to any one of us. They're taking away our First Amendment rights, chipping away at it. Then they took the sledgehammer to it after J6, just like with the gun laws, you know, chip away, chip away, chip away until it's the gun grab. And that always leads to mass murder, to destruction of a constitutional republic. And so we really have to stand in that breach and educate the public. That was one of the things. I'll put in a plug for our 1A Film Fest here behind both David and myself. You can go to 1afilmfest.com. We put together the 50,000 foot view ahead of the election so that people could understand COVID, the pandemic, the lockdowns were the setting the table for the stolen election. You had that first in place. Then you had the stolen election and the 2020, all the things that they did that we might not have known about had they not illegally installed Biden as president.
For too long.
After that, I'll be quiet if you want to play that. I don't know.
Yeah, actually, well, it's I wanted to play this video, but I didn't know it was going to pop on with sound. I wasn't sure what was going to happen, so I apologize about that. I didn't mean to cut you off.
I'm happy to let you play it.
No, I want to play it. It's a great trailer for what you're doing. And again, you know, the two of you are just quintessential entrepreneurs, but you're thinkers and you're freedom fighters, and you are selfless. You look at the problems in front of this country and you set your personal agendas aside and made the country, what's best for the country, the agenda, which means rising tides lift all boats. So personally, you go up with it. And what we've been unfortunately unwitting witnesses of is somebody who has the exact opposite. And that's Joe Biden and everybody associated with that narcissistic pedophile squatting in the White House. And so they've drug us down. But it is because of your faith in God and your love of country that, you know, the two of you are, you know, what I would consider some of the cream of the crop of freedom fighters in this country that will save this country and will restore law and order as it was intended by our founding fathers. So without that, without saying any more, I want to play this clip because I watched it and it's really quite powerful.
For too long, tyrants have waged war with information.
In this battlefield, our weapon is the First Amendment. Filmmakers are the trailblazers in this modern war.
New alliances are being shaped and battle lines drawn.
A parallel aggregate of information is forming.
The 1A Film Fest is the Armory of Truth. So don't miss it. Second week of September, Greenville, Texas. We'll see you in September.
So, and there you have it. I mean, this is the entrepreneurship. And I know that JJ walked away with some awards, I believe, at the Film Fest, right, for his work on treason and trafficked. And I'd like to enter my movie that I did on, you know, Ground Zero, North Carolina. And we'll be doing additional documentaries to follow it because this is how we get the truth out. This is it.
I'll just wrap it up and then let David talk more because he was. That little clip was by Andrew Mullenix, our filmmaker on our 1A Film Fest team. Fabulous talent and dedication, and the rest of it David can talk about. But so we took JJ's and Ryan Matta's film, This is Treason, Part 1 Traffic, premiered Friday night, and it shows how our government and the NGOs are the largest human and sex traffickers in the world. Very powerful film. And we want you to support all the independent filmmakers who were part of our launch, our premiere event, but we're having more, so we'll get you in there. And then we had Plandemic from Mickey Willis, The Great Awakening from his series on the pandemic. So we contextualized. We had the border crisis of we are here now. Then we went back and put it together chronologically so people could understand. Okay, it was COVID, the pandemic, the psychological warping of our society. You can't go out, you have to distance, all of that. Remember, we've gotten a little away from it. So it's almost like we have to be reminded that was such a surreal time ahead of the election. So then we go into the election. You saw Professor David Clements there who did the film Let My People Go. Incredible documentary. It's must watch. All of these are must watch films on their own merit, but you put them together and it's so powerful. And then we did the afternoon, and you can buy the whole package. I mean, it's $25 for all 12 films, and we're supporting everybody in it. So it's not like we're making a lot of money off this. Most of it is going back to more work. And then we did the J6 in the afternoon, and David's film Writing History. Then we did J6 A True Timeline, and then Chris Burgard with The War on Truth, he and Nick Searcy. And then it also added Bloody Hill, which is another one of David's film. And then a couple short films from filmmaker Mark Sutherland, kind of on dramatic shorts on this idea of totalitarianism and losing our government and our voices. And then Sunday, we rounded it out with, maybe Bloody Hill was on Sunday. I don't remember. It's in there. And then Mike Smith, as you know, a great filmmaker out of Hollywood who did Out of the Shadows, his sequel Into the Light is there. And then Adam Riva, who did The Crucible of Donald Trump. And so that was the whole package. It's all on the website. You can see each one of them, but very powerful. And then I'll let David take it from here.
David, do you want to add any more about 1A Film Fest?
Yeah, listen, I just want to tell people that it's the most censored films. It's the most educational films, the most honest and gripping films that you'll see. If you've seen any of them, then you can trust what I'm saying about that. They're amazing by amazing filmmakers. We wanted to showcase these things. It's the education the public needs. It's almost retro. We're doing it backwards. These films are out there. You can dig around and find them yourself. We're not selling the films. We're selling the experience of having them in that chronological order. If you know anything about the work that I've done around J6, I put things in chronological order so you can see what happened, how and why, by who. This kind of does the same thing over about a decade. So people really that don't have the education, they know something happened. They know they voted for Trump. They know that, Democrats are going crazy, whatever it is. This will explain so many different parts from, like she said, the pandemic through the election, through the abuses of the FBI, and what we've experienced by the weaponization of this Department of Justice and the Board of Prisons even. So it's a well-rounded, very worthy education that we encourage people to share to their friends that may not know as much. It's a very non-intrusive way. Everybody watches movies. Everybody watches films.
Oh, sure.
We even watch films on the other side, whether we admit it or not, because we want to see what they're doing. This kind of works that way, folks. And film is a powerful tool that allows us to kind of reach across aisles in our own house and across the street to maybe reach people that just need an honest education and an honest opportunity to see the truth and act on it. These people don't know what they don't know.
That's right. They don't. In fact, I call it opposition research if I happen to swing through, Rachel Madcow's broadcast at night, mostly because I want to see if she's still alive and kicking at this point. But anyway,
yes.
back to entrapment, because this is something that I think is going to be a hot button because, again, it goes back to the commutations and the J6 pardons. People were entrapped. I mean, I know people that were getting, literally said, oh, you got to come in. You've got to get me. You've got to get me out. I'm stuck in here, whatever. And those people who were calling for help didn't even get sentenced, didn't even have a hearing, weren't even charged. What do we do about the people who were the entrappers? Granted, we already have a plan for what we want to do about the people who were entrapped by those people, the innocent people that went in the Capitol and were walking in between the stanchions and looking at things and taking pictures. But there were people entrapping them. David, what should we do about those people? And I think you need to, I'm wondering if you've had a conversation with Kash about this yet, Kash Patel.
I have not personally, but let's just say we have. There's things that have to happen. Look, the American public has been fed this line that this was an unprecedented time. We can never let this happen again. You have to watch the left or the uniparty because they use the words that we should use. And they, like Tamara said, they steal our language and try to make patriot a bad word. This was unprecedented. We can never let it happen again. We need the markers in our history. We need the timestamps of when bad things happen because bad people did bad things. And that's the real consequences of the crimes that we need to see carried out. And look, that's on every level, this entrapment. It not only happened that day with special agents or agent provocateurs or Antifa or feds or whoever, but it's happened throughout the system, the DOJ, the court system. When you don't have all your evidence, or you're had police officers that perjure themselves literally on the stand and the judge does nothing about it. These are all forms of that. And the judges should be held to the highest standard. They did this on purpose. If they didn't, they're too dumb to be on the bench and should probably, suffer some charges because of that. But the whole thing is the intentionality. J6 is not a one-of event. And listen when I say that.
Right.
This is something that's been happening over and over and over. Not just Whitmer, not just Flynn, not just Waco, Ruby Ridge, 9/11, Oklahoma City, not just these things. BLM, other groups that have been infiltrated by feds or operatives or whatnot and made to war against each other. This was a divisive event meant by the Uniparty to split the American people so we wouldn't communicate with each other, so we wouldn't talk, so we wouldn't trust, so they could win and maintain and up their amount of control from Patriot level in 9/11 through the roof. Now they want new surveillance systems. They blamed millions of dollars on damage for having to buff the floor because we didn't tear anything up on J6. But all those fences, all their surveillance systems, everything has been added to that damages bill. So people think we really went in there and destroyed the Capitol or something. It's just not true. It's more of that entrapment on every level. So the architect of the Capitol, all these people are framing this narrative and this verbiage and using these words to try to make us look like such horrible people. And it's absolute fabrication of evidence and truth. And they need to be set as an example so that people see what happens. And I think Trump has a real great opportunity not to seek vengeance and be vengeful, but just to make sure that justice is served. That will be enough, because if it's true and these people are beholding to the same laws that we are, everything should take care of itself in a justice system. Yeah. But we have to get back to the basics of that, and maybe they can be a part of this great experiment to see if our legal prowess is still applicable, or our knowledge applies to these people. Look, and I'll tell you just real quick, 18 U.S. Code subsection 4 says if you know about a felony that's recognizable by a federal court, then you have to tell somebody about it. You have to report it to the authorities, or you can go to jail for 3 years. How many politicians, senators, congressmen, FBI agents, cops, local politicians, even any kind of rep on any level, have our J6ers told about Roseanne Boylan, Ashley Babbitt, Benjamin Phillips? How many times has it been reported for investigation? So what I'm saying is, an American citizen, maybe some people would agree with me on this, I think you could take our entire Congress and Senate and put them in jail for 3 years. That would give us a 3-year window to clean this place up. And even the guys on our side, look, I'm sorry, the law is the law. I had a friend went to jail for knowing or hearing about a financial crime. Same 18 U.S. Code subsection 4. He heard about it. He quit the job. FBI comes and says, did you know about this? I heard about it, so I quit. I don't want any part of that. Well, you didn't tell anybody, so you got to do 2.5 years in prison for a financial crime. These are murders that congressmen and senators and nobody opened an investigation to get justice for these people that were murdered by that administration, by those police officers, by that government and Uniparty. So they probably need to go to jail for 3 years if fair was fair and the law applied to all of us.
Well, I'm going to be looking very seriously at President Trump and Kash Patel to deliver exactly what the two of you just said, and what Sidney Powell has written in her piece that will be published, I think, later on today, if not in the next couple of days. I am going to read it after you all leave, because I want the audience to hear just how brilliant this woman is. And she has been going through her own personal hell. She's got $3 billion of lawsuits by Dominion, of all things, going after her. They've gone after many people, including Clay Clark, Mike Lindell, and there you go. You are a big supporter of the Kraken lady. That's it, defending the Republic.
I've got her whole mug and everything. I'm T-shirts. Yeah. So
well, I hope she's following you, because I did text her, remind her to, and I think she did. So maybe check your ex.
We definitely worked together on several different projects, especially in the J6 community. We're actually Yeah, and it's great to know that there's people of that caliber and that intelligence. It's not just yoke.
Integrity and
She is so,
integrity.
yes. And she took one for the whole team. People still don't understand what she did and how that all fits in this big picture. But I want you to know that it's coming. It may not be all those things that people have thought or dreamed of, but it's going to be more. I think that Trump has the best handle on the situation. He's a J6er. And I don't think that he has ever said for a minute that he's backed down on his promises. I think, like we talked about earlier, that test marketing and that education process is what we're feeling right now. So don't give up. Help is on the way.
I'm not giving up. I still want him to address the warp speed. That's a big, that's a real sore spot for me, only because, I was friends with the late great Dr. Zelenko, and friends like Dr. Jane Ruby, who is watching right now. She's just texting me. Shout out to her. She's been a relentless pit bull on the suffering and the just the injustice of these god awful RNA platform shots that are kill shots essentially. But, and we know our J6ers were punished. They're put in solitary if they wouldn't take the jab. So this is Simone Gold was one of them. Jake Lang, many of them have suffered in this. So,
well, just like with the COVID and Dr. Zelenko and speaking out, and the medical community, the freedom fighters within the medical got the information to the forefront. President Trump can't know all of this stuff. And so it behooves us, who are subject matter experts, to be able to bring it together, present it in a digestible form. That is what we've done with all the documentaries, with the articles. Dave and I, like I shared with you prior, we put out the first article January 27, 2002, about the 5 deaths of January 6th. And with the Gary McBride's video footage analysis of Lila Morris identifying her, with Philip Anderson's testimony of holding Roseanne's hand while she was, dying. And this is not new news. We've been relentless in getting this up, forming the words to call them J6 political hostages. All of that is why we have been on this since day one, to be able to get the facts, get the information, show the timestamps of, when things happened, when the police fired first on the crowd, what happened when the wind shifted and it went back on the police. That wasn't the J6ers. All of these things matter, so that when Trump does get behind something, he's got the facts, he's got the truth on his side, and he's got the support of his base to do so. And that was, one of our threefold things. Give Trump the support of his base, that should he act, should he have given General Flynn the pardon of innocence on November 25th, 2020, should he pardon the J6ers, his base is behind him. And it's the pathway for righting the wrongs when the judicial system fails. It hasn't failed in its objective. It's fulfilled its mission in getting prosecutions. The crime is worse than the cover-up is worse.
It's worse than the crime.
Totally applies here. They had to go after. They had to get plea deals so they could get convictions, so they could throw that number out there. They set the table for their set of statistics. We had to counter those with the truth and say, no, here's really what happened. And then, David, I'll talk about this. Our work is not done. Once we get the pardons, it's providing the means for the J6ers to be able to transition back into a new life after their lives have been destroyed, whether it's Jenny Codd and the Road Home Project down in Texas, where J6ers can go. We've got an article over at StopHate.com on the Presidential Medal of Patriotism. After Joe Biden desecrated the Medal of Freedom last month, we don't want anything to do with that. We want the new Medal of Patriotism, Presidential Medal of Patriotism, to be what is recognizing is stepping up for America and saving our country. So we've got that work, and then a memorial, hopefully at the Capitol grounds, for the 5 who died, or at least the 4 J6ers. So there you go. We've got it all out there. So, and we hope that a lot of the, if Congress is in jail for 3 years, we've got some J6ers who would be perfect to step into that role, because they know what the cost of defending this constitutional republic is.
It's almost as if they've sacrificed their lives, their fortunes, and their sacred honor, similar to 56 very brave men 250 years ago, all to restore the republic, for which has been literally usurped by a corporation. And many corporations in these public-private partnerships of hell, I call it, they would not be able to get away with what they're doing if it wasn't restructured into a corporate construct, unfortunately. And we will solve that. We will fix that. I want to ask one last question, conspiratorially speaking. Does anybody think it's strange that President Trump's doing a rally on January 19th?
Yeah, isn't that kind of funny? I guess we're getting ready a day early. Something crazy going to happen.
What is it possible that maybe he's already sworn in and maybe he's going to swear in on the 19th? There's nothing that says you have to swear in on the 20th. He's already been
sworn out.
Sorry?
Was he ever sworn out?
Was he? Good question, Tamara.
You leave it to Tamara. Really ask those really pointed questions like that.
Yeah. So, I mean, again, I just find it interesting because he doesn't have to. And, there's so much. I mean, these demons are, they're still spraying the skies like crazy. They're, the fires. It just goes on and on. The insult to injury. It's just too many horrible things they're doing to Americans to enumerate right now as we close this up.
That's
but
right.
Why would he have a rally on the 19th when he's going to be inaugurated on the 20th? It's all the pomp and circumstance. What do you think's going on?
Well, maybe he's doing a bigger setup for MLK Day to tie the two together and show this freedom fight. The same 3/5 of a citizen that happened in the civil rights and before was the same thing that happened to J6ers couldn't travel or vote or own a gun, and the same government crackdown. We can't eat or drink at the same places or stay at Airbnb. All these censorship issues. Maybe he's going to take a day early and help iron out the problems that we're going to have with the BOP because it is on a holiday, like Sydney was talking about. They're going to slow roll these people. They're playing the shell game. Maybe he's going to take a day to get ahead of the release of these J6ers and say, here's what's going to happen tomorrow. We're going to give them the hero's welcome that they deserve. So be prepared.
Well, I'm prepared. I'm not going to DC. I'm staying in Florida. I've committed to Suzanne that I would be available. I'll get a passenger van or whatever I need to rent to pick up people at whatever prison she assigns me to. And, I know my husband's ready to go with me. I've spoken to a few other people, but I don't want to put them on blast, but they're considering it. So we want to give them a hero's welcome. And I know that we can rally a lot of people to be there, but we want to make sure they get where they need to go safely and that they know they're loved and appreciated. So I'm really so happy to do that. I would much rather do that. No offense, no disrespect to DC and President Trump. It's not about that. It's about where my heart is. My heart is with the people. Mm-hmm. So
exactly. Yeah. I said, well, no, we've got our constitutional republic back when we don't see the chemtrails in the sky, when the cameras at every intersection come down, and when people like you and the J6ers can fly without being accosted by TSA.
Yeah. Those days, thank God, seem to be over. But we'll see. We'll see. Well, listen, David Sumrall and Tamara Lee, thank you so much for everything you have done for our country. I know that road is not over, and you all are truly gifted and talented, and you love our country, and you love God. So you're in it for the long haul. But I hope that you all find some time for you yourselves and your families after this. This next phase. You need a little time for you guys.
I appreciate that. One of these days we'll get that break, or they'll put the lid on. We'll have to keep,
This actually is our recreation.
Thank you for all you do, Ann. We
Thank
appreciate
you,
it.
Ann.
No worries. No worries. I'm just happy to be, I'm happy to know both of you. It's a blessing. Thank you so much for stopping by. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank
God
you.
bless you.
God bless.
God bless you. Bye-bye. Wow. Incredible people. I'm just really blessed to know them. And somebody else I'm very appreciative of knowing is this wonderful woman, Sidney Powell. She has been a stalwart in this movement. She has been defending the Republic since the day I met her, in fact, at a Charlie Kirk Turning Point USA event. I think it was in December of 2017 when she approached me and asked me if I wanted to interview her on her book, Licensed to Lie. And to be very honest, I didn't know who Sidney was at the time. I'd never heard of her, didn't know anything about her. It wasn't until I did a little research, I thought, wow, this is interesting. And then I learned that General Flynn had Robert Kellner as his attorney. And I recognized that Robert Kellner was the attorney that, we'd figured out the FARA paperwork got all screwed up. The foreign agent registered paperwork for General Flynn had been messed up. And it was under Robert Kellner, who was basically an attorney for Covington Burling, a firm that represents deep state. They represent lots of countries that are state sponsors of terror. They represented all the Swiss banks involved in the Swiss bank account scandal. Remember the 19,000 Swiss bank accounts and all that? And I talked to Joe Flynn. I said, hey, Joe, you know, your brother's attorney is no bueno. I had only met General Flynn once years prior in 2016 when he was campaigning for Trump. And I said, you should check out this lady, Sidney Powell. And well, by golly, he did. And, you know, the rest is history. She went to the mattresses for General Flynn and, you know, got him out. And look at the work she's done. And she's being persecuted for it. Just like everybody that does anything good for this country, they ultimately get persecuted. You know, they're called an insurrectionist or whatever. And I know it because I get the same attacks from the so-called MAGA, which are nothing but Brennan paid trolls. I believe anybody that's trolling anybody for J6 is a John Brennan paid operative, along with some other key people that are former CIA, according to Kevin Shipp. But I'm not going to name those names now because I don't really want to give them my platform for that. They don't deserve it. Anyhow, I want to take a quick second here and read this. This is what Sydney put up to me, and I think it's absolutely fantastic. It's her pardon article that she's publishing, and I want to just share it with you. It's going to go out, and it'll be on her website, and by all means, do go to her website, defendingtherepublic.org, defendingtherepublic.org. Sign up for her newsletter. You'll see I have it right on the screen right there. Sign up for her newsletter, and please, please, please support her with at least giving her the time to read what she puts out, because she is brilliant, and she's been fighting a Dominion lawsuit single-handedly, $3 billion since, you know, the whole thing started. So without further ado, this is a little bit from her article. To begin healing the nation, Trump 47 must pardon all J6 defendants, by Sidney Powell. And she starts off, does anyone remember Civil War history? You know, the atrocious war between the states that led to brothers killing brothers and much of the South being burned down in 4 years of horrors. More than 600,000 lives were lost, the most tragic war in American history. That was an insurrection. Nonetheless, on Christmas Day, 1868, President Andrew Jackson, following Lincoln, extended unconditionally and without reservation a full pardon and amnesty for the offense of treason against the United States or of adhering to their enemies during the late Civil War, with restoration of all rights, privileges, and immunities under the Constitution and laws. He pardoned every soldier who had fought for the South, and he did it so close that ugly chapter of American history and heal our nation. He did that to close the ugly chapter of American history and heal our nation. We have endured a decade of double standards and lawfare that has left an ugly, jagged scar on the face of justice, rendered the constitutional fabric of our country. Each of our three pillars of government has failed us. We have weathered years of the Democrats' lies, smears, and illegal schemes against the Trump administration, culminating in a stolen election in 2020, and prosecutions of Trump and many conservatives, while Democrats proceeded as they pleased. For those with prior doubts, the 2024 election numbers make plain the 2020 election was stolen from President Trump and the real voters. Our country has survived a coup and years of hell because of it. We have witnessed the rapid and wrongful deterioration of every aspect of our government and culture. We were forced to watch as our cities and businesses were burned and looted by real and violent riots caused by Black Lives Matter and Antifa, and with few, if any, actions by the government to enforce the law. In the last 2 years especially, we have learned much about the government misconduct that permeated every aspect of the prosecutions of the January 6 defendants, beginning before they even arrived at the Capitol. The double standards we have witnessed over the last decades are glaring and disgusting. Blatant injustices have annihilated public trust in our institutions. Here are just a dozen reasons why full pardons should be issued. January 6th insurrection narrative was planned and executed by the left. Government infiltrators of various organizations began planning and inciting it from the time President Trump suggested a rally on January 6, 2021. It was promoted, agitated, and mishandled by FBI agents and informants through it all. Days before the event, the FBI was trying to enlist people to engage in facially innocent acts that could be used against them in hyped up right-wing conspiracy charges. Dozens of agents and provocateurs were at the Capitol to stir it all up and to spur it on. Gallows featured in as many pictures as possible were not built by American citizens, but more likely by agents of the FBI. DC and Congress refused to help from the National Guard. President Trump offered 10,000 National Guard troops to secure the U.S. Capitol. D.C. Mayor Muriel Bowser declined Trump's offer, and the left did not want the National Guard protecting the Capitol. The mere presence of 10,000 soldiers, fellow citizens, would have served as a strong deterrent to any problem that might have arisen. Law enforcement fired into the crowd first and attacked the innocents. In many instances, they were grossly, if not criminally, aggressive. They shot tear gas canisters behind the crowd, forcing them up the steps. They provoked the crowd by assaulting peaceful protesters with rubber bullets and mace. Unarmed veteran Ashley Babbitt was shot and killed by Capitol Police Lieutenant Michael Byrd. Remarkably, Byrd was later promoted, given a $37,000 retention bonus, assisted with fundraising $160,000, and remains unpunished in any way. Law enforcement failed to enforce the law at the time. Perpetrators of a crime should be arrested when they're committing it in the presence of uniformed law enforcement officers. The act of arrest makes clear the seriousness of the conduct and deters others. But the goal was not to stop it, but rather to foment something they could label an insurrection. In furtherance of the setup to crush all Trump supporters, they knowingly let actions considered illegal to proceed fully without any intervention. Worse, officers even invited people into the Capitol, gave them fist bumps, and gave tours. Under no circumstances should the conduct of those invited in have been deemed criminal. These actions enforced the belief of most of the people who entered the Capitol that they had done nothing wrong. The FBI conducted a terrorist hunt-down of American citizens. No one was arrested at the time. No weapons were used or even present. Law enforcement allowed everyone to go home on January 6th as if nothing was wrong. Good people returned to carry on their lives while the Democrat media propaganda machine went into overdrive, blanketing the country with insurrection narrative. The FBI immediately began hunting down those who even got near the Capitol. They were treated as badly or worse than Islamic terrorists. They even terrorized people who rented houses or planned trips, anyone who came within their unknown and invisible geofencing around the Capitol. They arrested each with a massive show of force, multiple agents in full SWAT regalia, black cars speeding to surround homes, throwing flashbangs, and inflicting the maximum fear and humiliation possible on the defendants and ransacking their homes in front of their children and families and neighbors. They made a spectacle of each, and another huge waste of taxpayer dollars, and all for the purpose of crushing Trump supporters. The January 6th committee, breaking congressional rules, formed to continue the insurrection theater of the left. They spent tens of millions of taxpayer dollars, sent out hundreds of subpoenas, and interviewed or deposed hundreds of witnesses. They broadcast everything coming out of the prolonged, usually false narrative from the Congressional January 6th committee. They even changed a timestamp on a video to incriminate a defendant, while they and the FBI suppressed thousands of hours. 44,000 hours remain unreleased, a video that showed people were innocent. The abusive prosecutions began quickly before anyone could review all the video. The Biden Department of Justice, supported by the courts, overcharged defendants and bullied them to secure pleas. They twisted Section 1512C, a statute that was part of the Corporate Fraud and Accountability Act of 2002, part of Sarbanes-Oxley, to illegally prosecute over 300 defendants relating to January 6th. As congressional Republican Amici Curie briefs in the Fisher versus United States case observed, the DOJ's expansive application of Section 1512C criminalizes political conduct and grants the Department of Justice nearly unfettered discretion to prosecute Americans based on the perceived morality of their political beliefs. The Supreme Court would eventually reject the government's interpretation of Section 1512C in Fisher versus United States. Unfortunately, for the innocent, by that point, the statute had been used to sentence 133 defendants, and many had long been imprisoned. And in their failed effort to punish those who violated Section 1512C, the Department of Justice attempted to mislead the D.C. court by effectively rewriting the law to expand the sentencing enhancement beyond the bounds of its normal textual connotation and interpretive commentary. United States versus Brock. The history of similar abuses is also detailed in Conviction Machine and Sidney Powell's book, License to Lie. Over-sentencing. In many cases, the Biden Department of Justice demanded sentences exceeding federal guidelines and exceeding the sentences they sought in extremely violent and widespread riots that took place in D.C. in the summer of 2020, not to mention Portland and New York. Many D.C. federal judges were happy to go along with the charade. As D.C. District Court Judge Trevor McFadden observed, I think the U.S. attorney would have more credibility if it was even-handed in its concern about riots and mobs in this city. In Portland, after rioters violently clashed with federal agents and threw firebombs at federal courthouse, the Biden administration dismissed more than 1/3 of those cases, including dropping charges against 4 defendants who committed felony assault against federal officers. The horrific, inhumane conditions of confinement was reserved for and inflicted on January 6 prisoners, who were subjected to solitary confinement for trivial and legally improper reasons. In addition, many were combat vets, disabled with PTSD from war, and policemen or first responders who were singled out immediately and treated worse than more serious criminals, despite their service to the nation. Most experienced prolonged confinement in solitary cells, the whole. On January 6 defendant, a 3-star Bronze Star Army Ranger who served 20 years and intervened to keep an older woman from being beaten to death, has been in prison for years, denied bond, and still has not had a trial. On January 6 prisoner described being locked in solitary confinement for 4 months for reasons including helping other January 6 defendants in prison receive support from outside groups. A prisoner with cancer in the D.C. Gulag finally was ordered released to home confinement after a federal judge found conditions in the facility to be deplorable. That same judge had zero confidence that the D.C. jail would properly treat the cancer or that the accused would not face retaliation. Other January 6 prisoners were beaten by other inmates and denied medical care, forced to live with clogged toilets and sewage, and denied the opportunity to confer with their lawyers. Prisoner Ryan Samsel was severely beaten by correctional officers, suffered blindness in one eye, a detached retina, and a skull fracture. Conditions in the D.C. Gulag were so egregious that they required to move other prisoners to better facility, but they kept the J6 political prisoners in the Gulag. Prolonged confinement without trial, and in violation of the Constitution's right to a speedy trial, January 6 prisoners have been denied bail pending trial and forced to endure months or years in prison waiting for their trials. The DOJ improperly brought charges without being remotely ready to prove their case before reviewing all the evidence, including exculpatory evidence, demanding judges acquiesce to their demands for delays, causing prolonged incarceration. The government suppressed favorable evidence and trickled out what they did provide. Courts have reprimanded DOJ prosecutors for sloppy case preparation, for bringing charges without an indictment, and for violations of Rule 5 of the Federal Criminal Procedure when defendants were arrested outside the charging district of D.C. Americans have withstood a double standard for more than 4 years, which completely undermines trust in any of our law enforcement institutions from the FBI through the federal judiciary. As noted, the Biden Department of Justice pursued misdemeanor J6 cases while dismissing with prejudice felony cases against Portland rioters for assaulting federal officers. The double standard when it comes to J6 protesters has been apparent from the start, from raiding the homes of misdemeanor offenders, abusing the law, exaggerating the offenses, and stacking charges to lying to courts about sentencing guidelines and inflicting torturous conditions and confinement. Notable men like Steve Bannon and Peter Navarro were imprisoned for misdemeanors. Democrats were never prosecuted for. Americans have an innate sense of fairness, which has been repeatedly violated by this politicized harshness. The rule of law died. Nothing has been fair and impartial. Impossibility of a fair and impartial trial in D.C. It was impossible to get a fair trial in the federal court in the District of Columbia. Everyone knew it, and no judge did anything about it. In every case, change of venue was denied, despite the clear bias of the jury pool, fueled by incessant propagandized media coverage. In one poll of D.C. registered voters, 73% of respondents believed any individual who made their way inside the Capitol on January 6th should be convicted of insurrection. In a similar poll, 71% of the potential D.C. jury pool thought the accused were guilty, a stunning prejudgment in a system where the system must treat defendants as innocent until proven guilty. Yet another poll demonstrated that over 40% of the D.C. community stated that they believe all the events of January 6 were racially motivated. As a result of these constitutional violations and biased juries, prosecutors enjoyed a nearly 100% conviction rate. And finally, in closing, she writes, The Democrats' lawfare set up suppression of evidence, abusive prosecutions, grossly disparate sentences, and torturous conditions of confinement have destroyed public confidence in our legal system. In the interest of justice and to heal our nation, President Trump should immediately pardon in full or at least commute the sentence of each J6 prisoner, regardless of whether he or she is still detained pre-trial, after trial, or has been released. Each has already served more time than if they had received a proper sentence for any real offense they may have committed. Release all the J6 prisoners is an important part of the mandate we the people gave President Trump by an overwhelming majority on November 5th. On January 20th, 2025, Americans are watching for the first promise kept. And with that, I want to thank you all for tuning in. I think Sidney Powell is another absolute hero for our country, and she will certainly be remembered as we reflect on all she has sacrificed to deliver justice for we the people. Made famous, of course, through her work for General Flynn and getting him to change his plea to not guilty, because he was never guilty. He was never guilty. And I know that President Trump respects and honors that, and he and General Flynn are quite close. So the transition team is meeting, they're talking, and I know that all the work that you all have done out there to support these J6 prisoners, keep your feet on the gas pedal and your boots on the throat of the deep state, as I say. And please share this out. Give us a subscribe, give me a like, a thumbs up, and tell your friends. They've got to be all eyes on what happens on January 20th. But as we talked about earlier, I don't know, January 19th is of significance at this point. So all eyes on both these dates. And with that, God bless everybody. We'll see you again on the next edition of Steel News.